This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
We've hit our numbers every single month since we launched, so that's like not a fear. But I think for me, the fear is down to execution, right? I think have a really strong vision of where we want to get to. It's just a question of like, can we execute?
So there's a line I share, Nick, on this show quite a bit, and it punched me in the face when I heard it the first time, because I heard it the first time when I was around 39 years old. And the line was shared with me by Loretta Hidalgo. She's a founding astronaut at Virgin Galactic, and she says, it takes you 40 years to figure out who you are and the next 40 to be that person. And this is my way of saying, happy birthday. What are we, a couple
Don't remind me.
Oh, come on. No way. Wait, you feel that way for real? Welcome to 40, man.
I feel like growing up, 40 seemed old. And then when I hit 40, I'm like, I don't feel old. So I don't know. It's like,
Look, I'm old and I don't feel old. I just joked that I saw an intruder in the mirror in my house, some old man walking around here. It was like, who is that? But do you feel, come on, first of all, it's great to see you, because you meet people along the way and you're like, I want to just stay in touch with that person. And then life happens, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And thanks to social media, you can kind of like keep in touch with folks. But
that's right.
A lot's happened since you and I had breakfast.
A lot's happened since we had breakfast. And going back to, do I feel old? It's kind of interesting. I don't like to quote the like traditional folks in this world. I'm partial to a Winston Churchill quote from time to time, but Jeff Bezos said this thing the other day, and I saw it the other day, put it that way. I don't know when he said it, which is basically about like work-life balance, right? And he said, I don't agree. When people ask me how to get work-life balance, right, I said, I don't agree, because if you're doing something you love, then you take your energy home with you. If you're at home, you're really happy, you take that energy to work with you. And for me, that's been so true. And it was actually funny, because my wife said to me a few weeks ago, I've been traveling a ton, I've been working a ton. I said, I'm sorry, feel like I'm being a bad husband and a bad dad. And she's like, it's the opposite. When you are at home right now, you are the best version of yourself. And I was like, wow, suddenly struck a chord. And then quite literally, the spooky algorithm 2 days later shows me this Bezos quote, and it kind of plays back to me. I'm like, that's how I feel. But yeah, no, I feel like right now I have more energy than I've had probably in 10 years. Well, I say 10 years, like at least 5. I think my time at Snap, certainly the first 3 or 4 years, that had so much energy. And now I feel like revitalized and back there. So it's awesome.
And there's no knock on Snap, right? This is not a knock on Snap. We're all wired a certain way. And so when you honor the wiring, there's energy. And when you don't honor the wiring, of course, nobody talks like this and says it like this, but when you violate the wiring, and I think when we had breakfast, I felt, here's a guy that needs to, he's ready for his next thing. And again, it wasn't knocking Snap. You'd been there 3 or 4 years and doing some cool shit there.
5 years, five years. Yeah. And listen, I would not swap those days for anything. But it was interesting. It was like, there was a moment in time, prior to IPO, where we were so aligned on a goal of growing this business and going public wasn't the goal, but it was achieving kind of greatness, and it was a rocket ship. And I felt like from the moment we went public, all of a sudden we were being judged by the outside world. And, they say the stock market's like a voting machine, not a weighing machine. And I think it just created this really interesting dynamic at Snap in particular, where, it all of a sudden felt like we'd lost our kind of ability just to have almost zero inhibitions and just do what we felt was right. And I don't know how that's certainly how I felt, I'm speaking from personal experience. And I think it just changed something, and it just made it more tiring, because every single day, the headlines were talking about what we were doing. People were weighing in with their opinions. And they say, block all of that out and keep doing what you're doing. But it's hard, particularly when, your team are coming up and asking you questions about, our stock's down 10% today. Like, are we doing a worse job than yesterday kind of thing? It's like, no, it's exactly the same business as we were yesterday. It's just how it plays out. And I think for me, particularly after not like I was there for 3.5 years before we went public, like that was the dream period. We were just like, it was a rocket ship. Every day I was doing something I loved. And then there was something changed a little bit. And like, you know, it just became more tiring and I just kind of burn out. And like, you don't realize at the time that you're burning out. And someone, one of my colleagues at Snap said, you should take a sabbatical. And I was like, I can't do that. That's almost admitting like defeat, and like looking back, I kind of wish I had, because it would have recreated that like energy again. And, Snap was a business I love being in, and Snap's a business I still love today. And Evan's a leader that I love. And, it's just kind of interesting. But like right now, Fanatics is a privately held company, and that passion and that thought is there. And, long may it continue.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing you feel old being in a soon to be $100 billion business surrounded by and by the way, anytime I walk into a card store right now, I instantly time machine back to 13-year-old version of myself as I walk in there, and I'm like kicking myself. You've probably heard this story a million times. Kicking myself on the cards I've just gave away or left in a bag somewhere in my parents' house. But right, isn't that what this is? This is like a $50 billion business that's going to be a $100 billion business in the next 4 years, 3 years.
Yeah, so I mean, Fanatics is like an amazing story, an amazing company, and I in my career I've gravitated to leaders, right? I think that's when I've had a chance to think about this recently, why do I go to the companies I go to, and what's the reason? And I love companies with a bold mission. I love companies that want to disrupt, and I think for me, being part of a company where there's a leader who is the master of the craft, and I've had that throughout my career. I was lucky to be at News Corp and had a lot of proximity to Rupert Murdoch, and no one better in the newspaper and media world who understands that craft better. And just like a true entrepreneur, obviously went to Snap. Evan's arguably one of the best product leaders in the world, right? Went to Google and was really fortunate to work for Liz Reed and Kathy Edwards, who are both, in their own right, incredible leaders. And then coming almost full circle back to a true entrepreneurial led business with Michael Rubin. And that's where I get my energy. And it's it's so fun. And I think, what we're doing in the world of trading cards is exciting. I'll be the first to say I was born and raised in the UK. Trading cards were not a thing. We used to collect soccer stickers, and there's some parallels there. You would buy the album and then fill it with stickers, but it wasn't as if it was this hobby that had so much more than just collecting the album and then moving on. It has this lifetime journey. And when I was reached, when Fanatics reached out and we were talking about things, and they asked me was I interested in the collectible space? I was like, probably not really. And then I did a bit of digging. I was like, wow, this is an incredible opportunity. It's trading cards is a $44 billion business in the US. It's a business that started in the 1860s. The first trading cards were created in the 1860s. But you look at the cards from the 1860s, you look at the cards today, and in 100 and however many years, 60 odd years, not been that much innovation. And you look at how the cards are marketed, not that much innovation. And more importantly for me is with a digital mindset is you've got an industry and a community which is huge, right? Which is highly fragmented and has so many customer pain points. And I think if you look at the passion and the energy that exists around this space, just felt like such a cool opportunity. So
I almost wonder, because you weren't in the US, could you immediately see the scalability globally? And I can tell you, this last World Cup, I mean, I'm giving away my strategy. I should not do this right now. I just went to town on you on soccer. I'm just get the soccer cards, put them away, because
You're right.
there's a whole world down the line. But so coming from, like you said, it was like stickers. Could you immediately see, oh my gosh, like this is just getting started?
I think for me, what's like, from my time at Snap, from my time at Google, I think the thing that became very clear is that, there is a huge opportunity with community. Between my time at Snap and Google, I was actually involved with a company called Attention Capital, which was all about like the attention economy and the fact that, the only real true scarce resource we all individually own is time, and how we spend our time, and, and what we use, what we consume during our time is really what influences our lives, right? The stories we hear, the adverts we view, the media we consume, like really informs our opinion, and like literally changes the direction of our lives, whether we know it or not in the moment. If I read an article about, what's going on in, Israel and Gaza, it's like it changes my perspective on the world. It makes me care more about my kids. It makes me care more about my family who are abroad. It makes me like, think about religion, and like that's from reading one article. And it's so like where we invest our time and what we consume, like really like forms our lives. And I think what was interesting for me is when you take that into the world of like entertainment and passion, like sport is probably one of the few remaining things that allows us to chat to any stranger. You sit on an airplane and someone's wearing a Chiefs jersey, and you're like, oh, what do you think of the game this weekend? And it's like it's just such a bond. And I think, fandom is an extension of that. And, I think with trading cards, it's a way to express that, and it's a way to actually invest time and energy in something and create, the opportunity to speak with people, to trade with people, to, build a portfolio, to actually just put energy into something which you can chat to your friends and family about. And one of the things that, as you just said there, is like trading cards have such nostalgia, and they have such strong bonds. And, seeing going to shows like the National, which is the big card convention, it's everyone's walking around with like family and friends around them and sharing stories and catching up, bumping into people that they know through this galvanizing thing, which is the hobby. And it's like so cool. And I think when you look at like the digital incarnation of that, I think there's just a huge opportunity. I think like Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, Reddit, they're all kind of like in and around the space, but I don't think anyone's created something which actually brings that passion together and creates purpose for people to get together and have good conversation, and, and be at the right end of the internet rather than the bottom end of the internet, which is comments on a tabloid, a tabloid newspaper where it just brings the worst out of people. So
You're saying you don't like the anonymous comments that people post on certain tabloids? No, that's not doing it for you.
well, I think there's a better use of us of our time.
Again, I have a hard time still with the, do you really feel old, man? Because like, to your point, this is escapism. And let me rephrase that. I think behind the curtain you have a job to do, but for the rest of us, it's escapism in a world that, you kind of already hit it. It's a chaotic world. We don't have to go into the Super Bowl and the aftermath, but like there's very few things that help us transport or sort of put life on pause. Like I used to say, we should rebrand the news as the bad news at this point, because it's like bad
Right.
news after bad news. But here's a space, and I'm going to ask you to define what's actually at the intersection, your intersection, because I know that you nailed it already. Like the technology is so much better, so you've got the scarcity approach, celebrity. I can only imagine what your Rolodex looks like now. That's probably been a fun year,
Yeah.
and that how that's changed. So you've got like technology, and you've got celebrity, and you've got camaraderie, and you have community, and it's like you're a mental health company now, right? You're allowing me to like go find my happy place and bond with a total stranger we're going to do this transaction together. So
Yeah.
what are we're a little over a year in, and then you're like
Yeah.
14.
Oh, year and a month. Yeah. Yeah.
Give me like the biggest Like, first of all, permission granted to respond to that, but like, biggest aha moment for you so far?
Yeah, I think the biggest aha moment for me was, I mentioned it a little earlier. I went to the National in Chicago this year, and it's like, a long weekend where 120,000 people converge on this convention center. And for a start, right, you know, it is a little bit like stepping back in time. You go into this convention center, it was the height of the summer, and, classic, like, air conditioning's not working, the internet's terrible in there. But, put that to one side. The actual experience is like, you've got hundreds of like dealers set up, their tables, and it feels pretty chaotic. There's some charm to that, but it definitely didn't feel like a modern experience. But put all that to one side, I think the amazing thing is like, you've got, 100,000 people there, and most people are walking around with a backpack on their back. In that backpack, they've got their personal collection, and these are cards that, they cherish. These are some of their most prized possessions. And they're on a hunt for what they're looking for next. And they're going around and they're looking at these cards. They're sharing stories with the dealers. They're bumping into old friends. They're participating in the trade nights and it's not just, I think there's an easy way to look at the headlines around cards and think that it's just like, the Mickey Mantle cards, which are worth millions of dollars. But no, there's trade nights where kids are, trading dollar cards and like, trading $2 cards for a $3 card. And, they're super happy because they got a good deal. And then they're putting a few of those cards together and they're trading their way up. And, it's a great, like, these are like 10, 11, 12-year-old kids who are like being super entrepreneurial, and like, it's really that they're learning the like basics of haggling and dealing and trading. They're sharing stories. Everyone's having a blast, and it's dads with their sons and daughters, and like it's just like such an amazing experience. And like for me, the aha moment was, why does this only happen, periodically? And why does it only happen if you're fortunate enough to either live in or near, where the convention's taking place, or have the means to go there? And I think for me, it was like, how do we create something which brings that sense of community together 365 days a year, wherever you are in the world, and allow you to create bonds and relationships with people from all over the world around that common like theme? And that's what we're chipping away and sort of building towards now. And I think it's like it's like such a fun thing, because like I just wake up every day and try to build products alongside the team here who, like, that just make people's lives better in a very small way, right? I mean, we're not pretending to change the world here, but if we can bring like enjoyment and happiness to people on a daily basis, then I can go to bed every night feeling better. So
Give the audience a little bit of color on the difference between Fanatics and Fanatics Live, if you don't mind.
yeah, so Fanatics was sort of as a the original business, if you like, was born a little over a decade ago. Michael Rubin, our founder and CEO, sold the business to eBay, a company called GSI Commerce. And as part of that deal, he didn't go to eBay, but there were a few parts of the business that he kept and ran with. One of those was Fanatics. And, Fanatics was a business that sells merchandise, branded sports merchandise. And I think Michael's key insight really was like, to compete with companies like Amazon, you should go deep on a niche and serve that niche. And fast forward to where we are now, the business is really three core pillars. It's the original business, which sells merchandise. We have a betting and gaming business, and then we have the collectibles business. And I sit as part of the collectibles business and kind of lead the direct to consumer part of the collectibles business. And we have a few businesses in the portfolio that I oversee. We have a games business. So we have a number of iPhone games that allow people to collect and trade digital trading cards. We have Fanatics Live, which is a live commerce product where you can come and rip open packs of cards live. We have PWCC, which is a marketplace and an auction. And then we have the tops.com website, which obviously kind of sells product directly. So, that's the kind of portfolio of products. And right now they're very disparate businesses and it's still fairly fragmented. But I think, the vision and the mission over the next couple of years is to bring those together to really create a community where we can super serve collectors and hopefully also grow the hobby and bring a lot of new people into the hobby as well, right?
In your mind, when you say that, do you see that in the US or global? Maybe this is a layup of a question, but how do you look at it that way? What do you see?
So our business is like primarily US today, but yeah, I mean, I think international is like a core focus for us over the next few years. In particular, Europe, Japan, China, markets where there's already, a growing community and a growing collector base, and figuring out how we serve those folks better in those markets.
I mean, you've obviously been at some amazing spots and you've mentioned those spaces, but did you know Michael going into this job or did you meet him in the interview process?
I met Michael a bunch of times. We have a lot of mutual friends and I'd met him in passing, but it wasn't really until the interview process that I got to know Michael well. And and also what turned out to be pretty funny is Mike Mahan, who he'd hired to run the collectibles business, is someone I've known for a decade. So he said, I want to introduce you to somebody. And Mike Mahan called me and I was like, funny, like literally in 2019 we'd had lunch and said, we need to find a way to work together. He's like, I'm going back to lunch. Do you want to come and work here? We'll find a way to work together. I was like, all right, I'm in.
I mean, do you feel like you can totally be, it seems this way, but like I feel like you could totally be yourself. And this is where I wish we had video for the whole show because you're sitting in a hooded sweatshirt. It looks like there's traffic happening behind you. But like are you just can you be yourself every day here?
Totally. And I would say the one thing that has like stood out to me since I joined Fanatics is like not only the caliber of people that we've brought on board over the last couple of years, and it's really been the last couple of years where the company's really expanded with the growth into betting and gaming and collectibles, but the authenticity of folks here. I mean, I don't know whether people followed Michael Rubin on social media, but the person you see on social media and the person you see like, day to day is the same. Michael says what he thinks, like super approachable and whip smart. Like, you better know your numbers when you're chatting to him. Cause like, he remembers every number that I told him over the last year and a bit, and will take me. He's like, well, I thought last February you said you were going to grow this part of the business this much, and then now you're saying it. I'm like, oh, okay. But like, listen, yeah, incredible place to be, and like as you say, like for me, just turning up every day and just doing what I do, doing something I love, and having the autonomy to do it. I think again, that's huge credit to the way Fanatics is set up as an organization. Is it's like created this kind of portfolio of businesses and hired leaders to go and run the businesses and just go after it. But also, if I need something from, Mark King or the team at betting and gaming, or I need something from Andrew across on commerce, like people lean in and it's working really well today. So I'm excited.
It's funny. One of my mentors says her definition of success is when there's no daylight between the personal you and the professional you.
Love that. And that's how I feel today. That's how I really feel today. And listen, I think, not knocking my time at Google. I love my time at Google, but like, I definitely felt that was a little different. I didn't feel like I could show up and just be my true self and say what I thought, very candidly every single day. I just felt it was like, there was a little bit of a shield there, partly probably because I joined during COVID. Right. And so, I don't think you get to know people, and I don't think you build that level of trust and rapport via screen that you do in real life. But yeah, I mean, I think, for me, this is like, I show up every day and I just feel I can be myself and be authentic.
I also think that's actually how you pick up time. Like you almost feel bad for, and they're out there, it's normal, but like the companies that are kind of losing are the ones where people can't totally be themselves every day. And therefore you're like on eggshells, or now you're using strategy to be like, how do I get around the actual topic I want to talk about? Cause I'm afraid of the repercussions, or Or, like this is definitely a Bermanism, but I've said like, hey, in the past with old partners, like our logics just didn't match up. Our logics are not aligned. And I think you're going to continue to lose a lot of time if you don't have those conversations on the upfront. And so it's cool to see you, not like when it's been a while, you just seem lighter. And it wasn't like you were heavy back then. You just seem like, I feel like this is who you really are.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's funny that that's how I feel, right? And I feel like I say to my team every day, I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna say things that I'm gonna change my mind on. I'm gonna have opinions that, strong opinions loosely held. And I want everyone to be the same. And as long as we turn up and we say what we think, then we're going to progress. And, I'm lucky also that, I started on day one with, a team of one, and that was me, and was able to kind of handpick a team around me of like, a really awesome group of people, and very different, very diverse team in terms of where people have come from, and also their thought process and opinions. And I think we've we've grown the team fairly like slowly we grew the team fairly slowly over the first 6 months. We acquired a business of 150 people last May, which obviously was a culture shift for us, and we've been working to integrate and kind of bring that business closer in. But we got a team of people who are super hardworking, who hopefully love what they do, and come to the table with awesome ideas and opinions every single day. And again, one of the benefits that we have is the industry we're working is about fun. It's about passion. And a lot of the people who are in our business are have been collecting since since before they could walk, right? So it's super cool.
It's just they don't want to grow up. That's okay.
Right.
Don't grow up.
I love it.
I'm curious. It doesn't feel, this is the Courageous Podcast, so we do talk about the relationship between fear and courage, and one of the things we talk about at our business is being corporate fear fighters, and what is the biggest fear we need to hunt down and take on and shrink. But all I'm feeling from you is like good energy, right? And it's like you got to start a new business from scratch. Usually a lot of companies, what we see is there's a that has to happen. Like I always say, the sets you free. Like where do we got to go back and redo something or regalvanize. But is there any fear? What's the fear in your mind? Like what is, not like, I'm sure they're smaller, or maybe it's all hitting on numbers, but what fears keep you up at night, if any?
So we've hit our numbers every single month since we launched, so that's like not a fear. But the month we miss maybe becomes a fear. But I think for me the fear is down to execution, right? I think we've curated an incredible team. I think have a really strong vision of where we want to get to. I think it's just a question of can we execute? And not I feel like it's funny, I feel a sense of responsibility to collectors and to the hobby, and my fear is just not creating the product that I think they deserve, right? And I think that maybe sounds like a bit of a try thing to say, but I just that's how I feel. It's I feel like we're in a super fortunate position that we're part of a larger organization that is already very successful. We can draft off the amazing relationships that we have, whether it's the leagues or the athletes. I mean, there's genuinely no better company in the world, or no company that has the same level of relationships that we have. A couple of weeks ago we signed LeBron. But it's just and every single week we're adding these athletes. We have over 3,000 athletes that are signed to Fanatics today, and most of the major leagues. And I think that provides so much opportunity. But my fear is just getting lost in the opportunity, and not being kind of disciplined enough to stay on the rails. But I think, hey, that's a nice fear to have, right? I'll tell you, it's different. My fear coming in was Mike's you've got complete autonomy. Mike Mahan's you've got complete autonomy. Just go and build this. And I was you've heard that before. I think particularly like when you hear about larger businesses incubating stuff, if you like, you're like, yeah, cool. I mean, it very rarely works, right? I try to do this at News Corp. We try to incubate, and it's like it's just hard. Like acquiring, acquiring talent, or attracting talent, I should say, and b, like actually creating the space and the culture for people to act differently, behave differently, from stupid things like using different tools. I mean, I'll tell you a true story. Day one, I get to Fanatics, and I like get my laptop open, and it's like Outlook 365, and I'm like, nothing against Microsoft, but like I'm a Gmail guy. Like so like usually these are the things that are most contentious. Like no, we're on Outlook. Or you got to do this, you got to do that. And I was like, I want to use Gmail for our team. They're like, okay, great, do it. It's your business, do what you want. And it's like, from that moment on, I was like, okay, I literally can, build the culture and build the team and, approach this in the way that we want to. But, with the beautiful kind of protecting umbrella and frankly, deep pool of like relationships and resources that we can tap into when we need. And for me, that's been awesome because like, I don't only have a board of like incredible people, but I have this network of like invested like subject matter experts and people that I can tap on a daily basis. Whether it's Glenn Schiffman, our CFO, who was previously the CFO at IAC, whether it's Matt King, who is one of the most prominent folks in the world of betting and gaming. It's just like these people who I can Tucker Kane, who was like, general manager of the Dodgers before. These are people I can like. They're invested, and I can pick up the phone to, and they're gonna lean in, and great sounding boards for me every single day. So feel super fortunate.
I mean, there's layers on this, and like I could take this conversation in multiple directions, which I actually kind of what it sounds like your day one was like. What I hear a little bit on day one was imagine going to a bowling alley and there's not even lanes. There's no gutters between any of the lanes, and all the pins are set up. And it's like, well, which opportunity do we start at, and how do you prioritize the opportunity? I could see it being almost overwhelming, right? And then you get a quick yes, you can do that, and okay, wait, I can do that. Wait, I can actually go after the right pins right out of the gate. It, I love this article that I think it was announcing you, but it was talking about like the criteria of what you look at. Like, what does the company look at, right? It was, is this good for fans? Is it good for Fanatic partners? And is the business opportunity big enough?
Yeah.
Like, do you still use those? Are those the ones?
Yeah. I mean, that's how we, I mean, there's so much opportunity, in the world of sport. And like, you got like, over the last about what was it, probably 10 years ago, I printed out the Disney strategy map, the
Of course you
1950s
did.
Disney
Of course you
strategy
did.
map. And it was like Walt Disney had like, or one of the illustrators had created this map, and it was like, how you can flow users from theme parks to movies to merchandise. And this had kind of been something that I just thought was like so incredible. And like I was like, one day I want to create a strategy that is like an illustration on a sheet of paper that just defines how the whole business works. And what was interesting is like when I joined Fanatics is like you realize that our strategy is actually pretty similar with sports fans, right? The different, we don't own the IP, we kind of rent the IP from the leagues, but like actually, how do we super serve the fan and make sure that they have the best experience at every single touch point? And listen, we're just getting started. We make mistakes, and those are usually pretty well publicized. But I think there is, over the last 18 months in particular, Michael has a renewed focus, I should say, or like an utter focus on like how do we super serve fans and make sure that they have a great experience at every turn point, because that's the way to we want to create a brand that is not just a website that sells you a jersey, but a brand that is beloved by sports fans. And like, listen, we're not there yet, but that's, I think, a really good North Star for us. And we're going to chip away at that. And I think, going back to that Disney map, it's like, it's very similar. How do we pass fans through this experience? But, going back to your question about day one, it was funny, like, we still didn't have an office in LA. So like, first couple of days I was like working from home, and right before the holidays. I started at the beginning of January. Right before the holidays, I made, my first hire. And this guy, Andrew Eckert, flew into town. We were sat in my like home office at home with a big piece of paper in front of me. And it was like, and I bought this big notepad for my desk for like, you start fresh notepad. And like, we literally sat there, and it was like, he comes to my house at like 8:30 in the morning. We grabbed the coffee. It was the first time I'd met, and like we'd only really chatted during the interview process. And I sat down, and we both were sat in this desk in my office, and I was like, "All right, let's sketch this out. What does it look like?" And it was like so freeing and so amazing. And like I go back to, when I was at Snap, Imran Khan, who was the chief strategy officer, joined, and I remember it was probably his day 2 or 3. We sat with a bunch of the execs, including Evan, in one of the meeting rooms there. He stood up with the whiteboard and said, okay, if we want to go public in 2017, we're going to work backwards from that, month by month by month by month by month. It's like we're going to need like this many people, this many sales to do this revenue, to do that. And it was like watching a magician just lay it out. And I thought, listen, that was probably one of the most like energizing and directional meetings I've ever had. So it's like, we're going to do the same thing. So Andrew and I literally plotted down, okay, where do we want to be by the end of 2026, which was, 3 years out. Let's work backwards from there. And that literal first hour and a half became the business plan, if you like, from a numbers and metrics point of view. And we were within, I think like we overachieved by like 3% in the first year, and like we're hoping to overachieve, but it was just like literally we just executed. What do we need to do? And like we took that plan and then said, okay, what are the 20 things we need to do today, tomorrow? And like that's how we started like like fleshing it out, and it's been so fun, just like that absolute 0 to 1.
Do you feel like there's been any surprises? I'm sure there have been, but like what's been the biggest sort of like, surprise moment for you over the last 14 months?
This sounds strange. Like the biggest surprise to me is that, at a macro level, and even like, even to a fairly granular level, it's played out pretty much as we planned. And I've done a lot of startups, and none of them have played out as we planned. And I think, one of the reasons for that is probably due to the fact that, what I've learned over the last 10 years is that if you hire the right people and you give them the right runway and give them enough freedom to go and execute within their area, then, you're gonna get there. And like we've done that, credit to those folks. We've done that pretty well. And so far, no major surprises. And I think that's like, as I say, credit to the team. We huddle every morning, and we look at how the business is doing. Like, in my office, or in the office here in LA, we have like screens everywhere with the data on, and we're tracking it like minute by minute. We have like, we know what we want to do that, in terms of like revenue that day, and it like hour by hour, we see how we're doing against that. And feels like what we've built in the business is some really strong levers that when we're going off course, we try and correct. And so far we've been able to do that pretty successfully. So I think the biggest surprise is no surprises so far, but listen, we're going to get them. And I just hope that I hope that we have enough kind of galvanizing chemistry between us to tackle those when they come. And so far it feels that way.
All right, 2 more questions and you get your life back. First, do you see Fanatics as a fan-based business, fan-first business that happens to build community? Do you see it as a technology-based business that happens to be in the fan space? Do you see yourself as a community-based business? This is like the shell game a little bit. How do you prioritize it?
Listen, I think first and foremost, we have to be a fan-based business, right? I think if we don't earn and retain the trust and respect of fans, we're not going to win. And listen, like, we don't get that right every day. And I think that has got to be our absolute North Star, as I said earlier. That's what we've got to really double down on. And it feels like we've got a long way to go there. And And I think that's what keeps me awake at night. You know, you said fear, but that's what keeps me awake at night, is just like, how do we become better every single day at being great for fans? I think the world of sport is a big community. And I think like that, if we get community right, that is our unlock, right? That is what will make this business really, really successful. And I don't think you can do any of the above in today's day and age without, having a real focus on data, loyalty, and technology. So I think that's the enabler. But I would say that there's probably more of a shift in Fanatics now towards becoming a technology company to enable us to super serve fans than there was previously. I mean, if you look at Fanatics Live, the team that I oversee, we're like, I think 78% product and engineering. And, that's because I think if we want to become great at serving fans, then we have to understand our fans. And if they're interfacing with us digitally, that's the way to do it. So,
All right, now give me the pinch me. Am I really at this party or dinner or moment for you that you've had where you've actually have found yourself not in the moment at the party, but like, am I really sitting next to blank talking about blank, blank, and blank? Has there been one moment that you can honestly say, is this really happening?
you know, it happens at Fanatics fairly often. I mean, like this weekend, this weekend was the Super Bowl weekend, obviously in Vegas. I want to say I'm losing track of days. It was a blur, but the Saturday was the Fanatics party. And, it was, you know, someone described it as like better than Coachella in terms of the artists that we had there. It was like Chainsmokers, like Justin Bieber. There's like, everyone from, you name it, major sports stars, Tom Brady, right through to like up and coming athletes, from the Kardashians. And it was like, what was super interesting is that you suddenly realize that the thing that brought them together, apart from Michael Rubin, was sport, right? There's that deep passion, OBJ's there, everyone's kind of interconnected, 6 degrees of separation. And you just realize that, sport is so powerful, and it's really, I think sport and culture are very closely intermingled. So that's super cool. The other thing that is super cool is like we do these really small intimate dinners with, not just like our best customers, but customers that are super interesting and collect super interesting. And what's super fun is when we do these small, 10, 15, 20 person dinners, and you've got a collector there who we suddenly sit next to their, childhood idol. And, the joy and the conversation that occurs in those settings is awesome. Like I tend to be listening in those environments rather than talking, but like just it's just incredible. Like, when you get these intimate events and people are able to actually sit for a good period of time and just like talk about, something everyone around the table just deeply cares about.
Yeah, I'll go from my own experience on this one. So, surprisingly, as an American, Nick, soccer was my number one, and
Is that right? I
growing.
didn't know that. Who
Oh
was your
yeah.
team?
Well, to me, it was always the U.S. team. Like I always had faith in the
Right.
U.S. team because I didn't have soccer like you had.
Misguided faith, I would say, but
Hey, let's cut this part out of the show. Okay? No, and so I remember growing up, I know exactly where I was when Landon Donovan scored against Algeria. This was the year we played you guys, and that was
Yeah.
that fluke goal. We don't have to do that. We don't have to relive that. But I knew exactly. I was in LA before a shoot. I remember exactly where I was. Universe happens. I end up moving on this courage train, and when I end up in a room presenting, the book and like what I learned on my journey, and it's to a soccer team, and one of the owners, one of the coaches, Landon Donovan, and
Love
Landon
it.
and I ended up hitting it off. I've been writing his memoir for the last 2 years now, and he liked my book, and we're gonna have it ready for World Cup. But I might as well have been that same fan that you're putting next to, and you're like, just try to keep it together, Ryan. Try to keep it stay objective, which is how I felt when I met Landon. Now I know Landon To me, it's like Landon is Landon. Landon is Landon. Landon Donovan is different than Landon. He had to create that character of Landon Donovan. This is a whole
Yeah.
nother show.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your lens. This may or may not be a popular question. Your job is to make sure you constantly give the fan what they want and honor the fan. If you had to put a percentage number on it of the athletes that you've met, I'm curious if you're going to give me a real answer here. How much do they get it? How much can they step back and go, okay, none of this happens without the fan? Like, the fan is the reason that, they keep coming. If there's no fans, there'd be no professional sports. But I think that's, when someone's asking for your time all the time, or like sign this or be there or do that, like I'm going off Landon. Like, one of Landon's best friends is his hood, because he could put his hood on and like walk around and not be bothered by everyone. And it's not even personal. Like, Landon loves his fans. But I'm curious, when you've talked to athletes, especially at that level, how many of them you think are like, hey, I honor this, versus, hey, I really can't walk where I want to walk anymore?
It's a great question. And listen, I don't have a great answer, not being a superstar athlete, but I think what's interesting, just from what I've just like, listen, if you're walking out of the supermarket, and you're getting mobbed by people, it's like, probably not awesome. I think what's interesting is when you see, I was talking about these like dinners that we do before. When we do these dinners and people are in a relaxed space and they've carved out time and, they're there, what you suddenly realize is like they grew up as huge sports fans before they were huge athletes, right? And their passion is actually the sport that they play. I mean, like, I think if you ask most of these folks, like, similar, like, I feel like this fortunate right now, right? I'm doing something I love. Like, these guys and, these folks, like women and males, like, love what they do. And I think actually what's super cool is if you get them, in an environment where, they're not trying to get on with their life and, being asked for that 3-second selfie or signing an autograph, and they have time to have, meaningful conversations. They love it, right? And I think there's a big difference there. But listen, it's like, we live in a world where people, I think, probably because of social media, that those barriers have been divided even further, right? Or knocked down even further. And everyone feels like, if you're a celebrity, you're just fair game. And I think that's gotta be hard, right? But, I think what we've seen is like, if you actually, if you get them in the right environment and, and give them the right sort of space and time, then they're as passionate about these sports, they're more passionate about these sports than anyone else. And they love talking about it. They love like telling the stories. They love like, hearing about other people's stories. Like, I was at this game and I remember this, and like, they get a real kick out of that. So yeah.
All right, take us home. This is, what's your sort of, if you look back at your ride so far, and and you're in it now, you're still in it now, but like, what do you want to leave the audience with? Is there like, from a courageous standpoint or from an energy standpoint, like, what do you want to leave everybody with?
I'd say two things. For people who are listening, like, how we actually met is that, I referred to it earlier on. I was at Snap and we'd gone public and things were kind of hard. And we were doing an offsite, and I was looking for someone to come on the offsite and like, talk to the team and just kind of create energy and inspire. And I came across you and invited you to that offsite, and you were awesome, right? And I think I would say for me that it's who are those people in your life that you've met and you keep in touch with. And like, the reason I'm here today is because we've kept in touch, because they've had a really meaningful impact on your life. And I know, like, this sounds a little cliched now, but I truly believe that it's who you choose to spend time with. It's who you choose to keep in touch with. It's who's in your Rolodex that, you go back to and you keep relationships with, because they bring something positive. And that's the reason I'm here today, is because like we've kept in touch, albeit not as often as I'd like. But like, I think for me, that's one of the things. Like, surround you with people who make you better every single day, and that might mean have a particular skill set or just have great energy, right? And I think for me, that's one of the things that I've really learned. If I look through my career to date, when I'm happiest is when I'm inspired. And for me, like, I tend, despite the fact I quoted Jeff Bezos earlier on, like, I tend to not be inspired by like the kind of poster children of industry, right? I get inspired by the people that I spend all day every day with, or like people who I've met in life and keep in touch with. And I think that's super important. And I think the other thing I would say is that, like, despite the fact I joked about getting old, like, I feel like I'm in like the first innings, to use a sports quote. And the great thing about working in Fanatics is we can use sports. We can use
Metaphors.
Every single day. It's like, it's completely fine. But yeah, I really feel like I'm in the first inning, and I feel like, it's almost as if like I'm just coming out of university, and the previous 20 years of my career, or 25, because I started like when I was 15, but previous 25 years of my career were just like me learning, and now I'm getting to apply that. And you know what? I hope when like we do this podcast again when I'm 50, and you remind me that I'm 50 and ask me if I'm feeling old, I say, you know what? Like, I'm in the first innings. I feel like, I've got 35 years of like learning, and now I'm just getting, but like, I really do feel like, I've been so fortunate to have access to incredible people and being able to apply so many different learnings, and the stuff I've done right, the stuff I've done wrong, but just like that pursuit of like, how do I become better at what I do every single day is like super cool. So
I also think that the older we get, I'll speak for myself because I'm older. The older I get, although you're displaying this, the easier it gets to share warts and all. Like, it's easy to share the freckles, embrace your freckles, and be like, look, I'm going to mess up, prove me wrong. This is a belief until it isn't, right? Like, there's a little bit of messy, like coloring outside the lines. Look, on behalf of the show, let me also thank you for not using a cricket metaphor to end the show. I appreciate you not using a cricket metaphor. You went right to baseball. Wait, cricket's not innings, right? Cricket isn't innings, is it? I feel better already.
Yeah, cricket is innings. Cricket is innings. Yeah, I think. Okay. Don't ask me. I'm like,
when you said innings, though, you meant baseball.
I
right?
was talking about baseball.
Okay. That was close. All right.
My son has his first T-ball game tomorrow, so that will be. I can officially say I'll be attending my first T-ball game tomorrow.
I look forward to seeing that on social media. A little video.
I will post it.
What's his team? Do you know his team name?
They're called the Tides.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to think at the time. I was going to say the Waves. No, they're called the Tides. So.
Go Tides, go. Nick Bell, everybody. Thanks for joining, buddy. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Good to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.